So Kamala Harris chose Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her vice presidential candidate. And I found an interesting little tidbit about Governor Walz and possibly a connection with him and George Floyd and China and money laundering. Be interesting. Let me go through it. In January 2020, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol seized $900,000 in counterfeit U.S. currency in the International Falls, Minnesota, from a rail shipment that originated in communist China. Okay. Why were the police originally called on George Floyd just 4 months after the CBP seized nearly $1 million in counterfeit bills in Minnesota? Because George Floyd attempted to pass a counterfeit 20 in a Minneapolis grocery store. Where did George Floyd get the fake 20 from? That's a question that I don't think anyone has ever asked. Or that's a question that I've never heard anyone ask before. As we all know, one of the 4 officers who arrived on the scene for the counterfeit currency was called Derek Chauvin. Prior to this incident, Floyd and Chauvin worked together at the same sketchy club/restaurant called El Nuevo Rodeo. The owner of the club, Maya Santamaria, said that Chauvin worked security there for 17 years when he was off duty. She also said Floyd worked there as a bouncer for several years, and both worked on Tuesday nights, reported by CBS. And I had heard that before. How is it possible that Chauvin and Floyd didn't cross paths or know each other? This was not a large place. They worked the same nights. Moving on. Who was the governor when $900,000 in counterfeit bills originating from a rail shipment in communist China were seized by CBP in Minnesota? Who was the governor when George Floyd died in the same day he tried to pass the counterfeit 20 and the city of Minneapolis, including the local police precinct where Chauvin worked, was subsequently allowed to burn to the ground, all of which occurred 4 months after the counterfeit bills originated in China were seized by the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol? Governor Tim Walz. So what? What does any of that mean? What is the possible connection? There's currently an avalanche of reporting calling attention to the extremely curious, troubling, and deep connection between Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and, you guessed it, Communist China. The formal connection between Tim Walz and China go back for more than 35 years. Tim Walz received a special work visa and was a teacher in Communist China dating back to 1989. Around the time of the Tiananmen Square massacre, Tim Walz went to China every year between 1996 and 2003. He was a school teacher. Where would he get the money to make a yearly trip to China? What the heck? Tim Walz and his wife spent their honeymoon in China with over 60 Americans in tow. Tim Walz himself admitted that he's been to China over 30 times that we know of. How much is a plane ticket to China? To China. How much is the cheapest flight to China? China. No, let's go to Beijing. And Searching. And I'm searching on Expedia. I can't even talk. So you're talking about least expensive, 1,300 or almost 1,400. Most expensive, you're looking at $2,500. And I think that's each way. Wow. On a teacher's salary? That's amazing. Anyway. All right. Tim Walz went to China every year. Honeymoon 30 times. Tim Walz and his wife set up an exchange program to take U.S. students on trips to China, a program that was funded by the CCP. That makes sense. Tim Walz reportedly failed a security clearance in 2021 for a job in the Biden administration due to foreign influence. That's interesting. No other details were given. Tim Walz claimed he'd been fascinated with China since his childhood because he remembered seeing pictures of Mao Zedong being frequently carried in parades in Nebraska. What type of parades was he going to? Those are just a few connections currently hitting the news. Kamala Harris has chosen Tim Walz to be her Veep nominee. Who became famous for raising money to bail out violent rioters who caused chaos and destroyed the cities of Minneapolis in the wake of the George Floyd riots. Riots that resulted in the local police station being burned to the ground, causing over $1 billion in total damages. Riots that started after George Floyd died on the same day the police were called after he tried to pass a counterfeit 20. 4 months after the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol seized $1 million, or nearly $1 million in counterfeit U.S. currency on a rail car in Minnesota that originated in communist China. Kamala Harris. Kamala was one of California's 2 senators at the time. The other, California Senator Dianne Feinstein, whose private driver for over 20 years was a spy from China. So I would say no direct, from this that I read, no direct connection for Kamala to China that I could see beyond her getting a bail fund put together for violent rioters in Minnesota. Why she did that, I could see that being politically motivated because they were running against Trump and he was more law and order, and she was going for the George Floyd sympathy vote type of thing. A bunch of id poll basically. So maybe there's something more between Kamala and China, since there are peripheral connections, definitely. But really, I'd love to see a little bit of digging into, if it's at all possible, digging into how on earth George Floyd got a counterfeit 20 and why Tim Walz liked China so much. That's concerning, I would say. Very concerning. Because, communism is kind of a country killer. Or maybe not a country killer, but a killer of a lot of the populace of the country. Communism has killed hundreds of millions of people at this point in time. And there are many people within the United States that wouldn't mind doing the same thing here, which is a little bit concerning. I think communism needs to stay away from our everything. If people in China want to be communist, they can be communist all day long, as long as they don't spread it here. But that's the problem with communism, is one of the many problems with communism is they love to proselytize. They love to spread it as far as they can. There was actually, I listened to 2 different Tucker Carlson interviews recently, one with Mike Lee, a senator from Utah, and the other, Ben Carson. Both Ben Carson and Mike Lee mentioned a very important book that both of them had read, The Naked Communist by Cleon Skousen, a book that I have not yet read, but I always saw it on my parents' bookshelf. Why I haven't read The Naked Communist yet, I don't know. I will rectify that very shortly, and I'll probably do a video about it pretty soon as well, because it's becoming more and more and more important that we educate ourselves to what the aims of communists are, and what steps they take to conquer a country and push their communist ideals on that country. Anyway, interesting news today about Tim Walz and Communist Kamala. Oh, that's a good one. Communist Kamala. Yeah, I like it. Well, that's all I got today. If you like what I have to say, please like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye.